We've got something a little different for you this week. The technical gremlins finally caught up with us, and the recording of our most recent session failed. So instead, I thought I would make a short video describing what happened during the session so that the story was not lost. It was a session in which new NPCs were encountered and lost, and certain party members came much closer to death than they were used to. So, pull up a chair, settle down, and I'll tell you a tale of the journey of our heroes along the river. It was a chill and windy morning when the huge Aasimar warrior Vermouche saw the crew of the Smokestreak off on their journey from Sandorne Keep. The other blood hunters had departed throughout the previous night, saying their farewells before dispersing back into the wilderness in differing directions. Vermouche, towering over our heroes, promised that they would always find refuge at the keep, and that the extensive library of myth and lore would always be at their disposal. After discussing the best way to get back to the Smokestreak, the party decided to follow the path of the Drakenswift, a mountain river that had its source in the high peaks of the Balnock Spine, somewhere north of Drakenham. Vermouche reminded them to keep their eyes open for any sign of the fate of Sir Scouran Boonstrike if they were to pass through Saltmarsh, then waved them off into the snow-filled mountain air. The Drakenswift was easy to find, cutting across the path north in a fast-flowing roar. The waters of the Drakenswift were icy cold, far too cold to drink, as it was fed by the melting ice of the mountain peaks. The river was far too fast-flowing and shallow, with many falls along its length, to allow navigation by boat or raft, though it offered unparalleled views of the alpine valleys and lands beyond when the cloud cover dispersed. The weather began to warm as the party followed the river downstream, and the weather was clement, putting the nightmarish events of their stay in Sandorne Keep to the back of their minds for a time. After a day's uneventful travel along the river, the group encountered the first person they had seen since leaving the keep. Sat on a high rock, smoking a pipe and whistling a jaunty tune as she watched them approach, a young half-elf jumped lithely down from her perch and introduced herself as Berry Hindergrass. The young ranger asked for any news, and told the group she was also travelling downstream as far as Linnet's Spinney. She was a wanderer in this part of the Western Commonlands who had been hunting a rabid bear. The group acceded to her joining them on the journey. The temperature continued to warm as the group descended from the high parts of the Commonlands, when their pleasant journey was interrupted by a huge rock being heaved at them from behind some bushes. A young hill giant appeared to be using them as target practice. The group began to take up defensive positions like a well-oiled machine, as another rock narrowly missed Tiberius. As Atticus ran forward to confront the creature, something huge tore through the trees towards him with a roar, and, rather surprisingly, a set of shouted instructions.
No, Del, not like that. Like this.
The huge hill giant mother, who had been training her son in the arts of ambush, landed next to Atticus and with a huge swipe of a club as large as a tree trunk, smashed him to the ground, breaking at least one bone and winding the fighter, who was very seriously wounded. The mother and son were then joined by the father of the hill giant family, who also charged at the party, looking to protect his son, who was still lobbing rocks at the group, and then the fighting began in earnest. Roger used his magic to heal Atticus, whilst Hecate cast greater invisibility and threw spells at the giants. Tiberius charged in, and Berry aimed her arrows at the creatures. Recovering, Atticus added his gunfire to the fight, though he and Tiberius were both badly beaten before the giants fell. Urged by Berry not to stick around in the aftermath of the fight, the party moved off away to recover. Berry expressed concern that the giants were to be found this far down the foothills of the mountains, and for the next couple of days the party travelled warily, eyes open for any more signs of trouble. It was approaching lunchtime when the party came across a unique and unusual sight. The Drakenswift ran into a huge lake that was notable for the many vibrant colours of its waters, giving the impression of some abstract watercolour painting. Berry informed the group that this was the Painted Pool, a place of myth and legend. The Witch's Cauldron it was called by some, who tell tales of ancient hags that practice magic in its waters. Olidamara's sketchbook others called it, saying that the god Olidamara himself came down to mix his paints in the lake. Whatever the truth, the result was a place like no other. Closer inspection showed the vibrant colours to be due to several factors. The waters of the two rivers that met in the lake mingled, seeming to conjure some kind of chemical reaction, which, as well as colouring the waters, caused brightly hued crimson and violet reeds to grow below the surface. It was as picturesque a place as any to take their lunch. Guided by Berry, the party followed the River Linnet, where it issued from the far side of the multicoloured pool. The Linnet was a fast-flowing, icy-cold alpine river that flowed eastwards, down across the meadows towards Stormbreaker Bight. Berry told them that whilst the river was not suitable for watercraft at this point, by the time it reached Linnet Spinney it formed the northern boundary of the Cerulean Empire, and the river slowed enough so that a raft might be fashioned. The next 2 days were pleasant. The warmer climb, paired with the beautiful alpine scenery, calmed the souls of the travellers, and the bountiful wildlife, from brilliantly coloured butterflies to salmon-catching bears, offered welcome distractions. Then the party finally reached Linnet Spinney, into which the river flowed. The forest had widely spaced trunks and was clearly archaic. Its canopy was eclipsed by linden and poplar trees, and cascading light bouncing between the leaves allowed for bright shrubs to flourish in the branch and twig-laden ground below. Coiling branches embraced most trees, and an array of flowers which blossomed brightly stood out against the otherwise mundane terrain. A hodgepodge of wild sounds, belonging mostly to insects, gave the impression of multitudinous life, and they seemed to be strangely synchronized with the sound of the wind blowing gently through the woodland. It sounded like the entire forest was breathing. The group decided to make a raft to aid their journey down the rest of the Linnet. Some good skill checks meant that after a couple of hours they had managed to fashion a serviceable and functional raft, though it was now starting to get dark. So the group made camp for the night, their intention to set out early in the morning. When dawn did finally arrive, it quickly became apparent that Berry was missing, and a quick search of the camp showed a worryingly bloody trail leading into the depths of the wood. Gathering their weapons, the party followed the trail, eyeing the shadowy boughs above. The trail led away from the river, and it was obvious that whomever had made it was badly injured. The air grew thick, and the slowly breathing wind slowed to a deep panting sound. Ahead, the trees opened up to reveal a grisly sight. Pinned to a large rock was the outstretched form of Berry, her arms pinned to the rock and her entrails arranged around her feet in some ritualistic pattern. And then it struck. It was older than the many of the trees of the wood. It had stumbled here to this place by accident from the depths of the Shadowfell. It was a creature of dark energy, thin, skinny, tall, and with sharp claws and long, chittering teeth. It was the Hunger, and it was aptly named, for it craved to feed on the life force of others. Tiberius transformed into his wolven form and charged in, rapidly followed by ranged attacks from his comrades. But his early confidence began to waver when the creature turned on him, grappled him with long, bony fingers, and fed on his vital life force. The gnome was in danger of falling. As Atticus attempted to distract the fell spirit, Hecate and Rodri used their magic to heal Tiberius. But the healing magic seemed to feed the Hunger, making his attacks even more deadly. Things were getting serious, and Tiberius's eyes glowed with bloodlust, the gnome unable to tell friend from foe. Hecate gathered the powers of the Coven again, and animated one of the nearby trees, which reached down and successfully grappled the Hunger, lifting it from its feet, while the monster itself held Tiberius aloft. The witch insisted that everyone call her puppet Mr. Woody. It turned the tide of the battle. It was a closer call than the group had suffered for some time, but they eventually defeated the Hunger, which erupted in an explosion of black ash. Recovering, the party checked on Berry, but their worst fears were confirmed. The young ranger had died. It took a few hours for Berry to be properly interred, but the party took their time and ensured she was properly buried. Tiberius had found a strange black silhouette on one of the large rocks in the clearing, his blood hunter knowledge telling him that it had once been a portal, the place where the Hunger had arrived in this place. Finally, however, it was time to put the forest and the mystery of the Hunger behind them, and they carefully poled their raft out into the river and headed east. A day later, they found themselves staring down at Lega's Arm, a huge saltwater lake formed at the end of Stormbaker Bight. Crossing the lake, marking the northern reach of the Cerulean Empire, was the impressive sight of Lega's Span, a huge bridge some 350 feet above the water, once used to aid the Imperial Army in passing over the loch. And there, anchored in the shadows below one of the towering supports of the bridge, floated the Smokestreak. The eventful journey east along the river was finally